For a thriving transition back to school. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Joanne Fetterman, and as Executive Director of Family Connections of Northeast Ohio, I am honored to introduce our speakers and tell you a few things about Family Connections. At Family Connections, we build resilience for young children and their families with a continuum of programs from birth through kindergarten. We focus on parents, grandparents, caregivers, and children together during the child's first 2,000 days, a most critical period of brain development. Our programs nurture social connections, enhance child development, and improve school readiness. We have a long history of collaborating with other organizations to make sure families have the needs that they have. One of the pressing needs for our wider community is helping both parents and children transition from remote to in-person learning. During the many challenges of the pandemic, our staff have worked hard in very creative ways to connect to families. We conducted virtual home visits and support groups. We texted, called, and met outdoors. Despite the heroic efforts of parents to support their children's online learning, children and parents struggled to meet the academic expectations for school. The social and emotional needs of the children and parents often outweighed being able to prioritize academics. Our staff helped families access rental assistance, food, healthcare, mental health, and technology. For many of our families, our staff were their only link to the community and to schools during the months of isolation. Our experience supporting families with young children during COVID has demonstrated that families are struggling with the stress and disruption of this current reality. We know these challenges will impact the transition back to in-person learning for both parents and children. So, to address these questions and concerns and develop strategies for a thriving transition, we have asked Dr. Sarah Spanigal to draw from her extensive background to provide information and support for you. Dr. Spanigal is a parent of 2 school-agers. She is also a licensed clinical psychologist in Ohio and has extensive experience working with children, adolescents, young adults, and families in both school and medical settings, such as Hathaway Brown, Rainbow Babies and Children's, Case Medical School Department of Pediatrics, to name a few. Additionally, we have asked Tiffany Scruggs to serve as our moderator. Tiffany is a parent of 2 school-age children. This fact, combined with her former participation in our programs, gives her a personal perspective to the conversation. As Vice President of Client Services for the Greater Cleveland Food Bank, she has a keen understanding about the pressures on families to access basic needs, particularly during the pandemic. We are fortunate to have Tiffany also serve on our board of directors as vice president. Very special thanks to PNC and Third Federal Foundation for sponsoring this program tonight, and to Metro Health for providing technical support. Their awareness of the vital importance of early childhood and family support makes this program possible. And now, let me turn it over to Dr. Sarah Spanigal and Tiffany Scruggs.
Thank you, Joanne, so very much for that lovely introduction. On behalf of the Board of Family Connections, we are thrilled to have this opportunity. We appreciate the supporters and all of our viewers for tuning in this evening to discuss such a very important topic. We are so thrilled to have Dr. Sarah Spanigal with us to share her guidance and expertise and also personal perspective as we prepare for in-school learning. Dr. Spanigal, how are you today?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Doing well. Good. So thank you so much again, and we're really excited to have this conversation. So we're just going to jump right in and get to what the viewers hope to receive in terms of our messaging tonight. What do you hope to convey to parents and caregivers tonight as we prepare for in-person learning and to return to the start of the school year?
Mm-hmm. So as you said, I'm hoping to have kind of a conversation, 2 moms in one space who've lived these last 18 months, which have been a challenge. I'd like to create a safe space. This is a very vulnerable time, a very stressful time. Everyone's pretty worried and remains worried. So I'd love to create a safe space tonight so that we can have a really honest, sincere conversation about some of those things. And then I'd love for the families to walk away with some really practical strategies as they return to learning this fall. I think we've learned a lot in last year. There's still a lot to learn, and I'd like to help that transition a little bit better. And then to acknowledge that even if we transition well, there's going to be dips. So how can we maintain the gains that we make? Because there's inevitable little dips, as we know, anytime we move through anything. So some real practical strategies to start and to maintain as we go through this school year.
Thank you, Dr. Spanigal. You talked about stress and anxiety. Is that normal for families, for parents, for children to endure stress?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think, stress sometimes gets a bad rap, for lack of a better way to describe it, but we need like the sweet spot of stress, right? We need the right amount of stress to get us places on time, to get us moving in the morning, to do our very best, right? Keeps us honest and safe, right? So the right amount of stress is great. What we see even outside the pandemic is sometimes stress goes to a level beyond what we can cope with. And that's when it becomes a concern, right? If it exceeds our ability or our toolbox, then it's of concern. Most certainly in the last year, what we've seen is that regular extension of stress that happens, that kind of goes into anxiety, right? Goes beyond. We've seen that. What we've also seen is this pandemic has really taken everybody to their core. So those very basic needs, at least, it's starting out and then it kind of maintained, were threatened in some way, right? We were worried about livelihood and access, and our kids all of a sudden were home with us, right? So we had that basic level really disrupted, and that added stress, right? That's really stressful for us. And then, like I said, our kids were then home. We were still maybe working or trying to find work. And you're worried about your basic health in the last year, which I don't know if you can think of something more stressful, in your kids' health. So this year went to that extension that normally, we'd start to worry about when you go to stress and beyond, when you exceed your toolbox. And then we really saw it this last year in the pandemic, and no one had ever done it before. None of us knew what to rely on, to know what to guide us. And we were really caught off guard, I think. So it's been a very stressful year. So regular life stress and then a pandemic.
Thank you so much. And I would concur that stress is normal. Mm-hmm. Speaking as a parent, as Joanne mentioned, I definitely understand being in stressful situations and also having some anxiety as we prepare for the school year to begin. So what should our caregivers be considering as summer draws to a close? Yeah. So, school start times are varying a little bit, but right now we've got about 2 and some weeks left of summer. And it's a little bit of having one foot still in the summertime, right? And what's on the bucket list to still get done, big and small, right? Maybe it's a day trip, maybe it's seeing cousins, maybe it's you wanted to grill or do something fun or play in the yard, right? What are those things of summer still left for a family to do that your kiddos or family want to do within reason, because everyone's really busy and all those things considered. So what's left on that bucket list? And then using the summertime to edge kind of back towards self-care and good routine and structure. So I don't know about your house, Tiffany, but we've strayed a little bit from good routine and structure. So to kind of pull it back, because again, when I mentioned the stress, we know there's this base level of care and needs that need to happen to be our very best. So we need to start working families and kids back to taking care of themselves. And by that, I mean getting back to a good sleep schedule, right? When do they need to go to bed? How much do they need? Able to stir them in the morning to go to school. So can we get those kids back to a good sleep schedule, get them rested? What is diet like, right? Is there any way we can kind of shift to make sure that we're meeting those needs, whether it's within our own home or securing things in the community that would be helpful for a family? How can we meet those needs? Is there any of that lingering, like summer reading left to do, right? Are there any school expectations? Some schools gave even more this summer. Are those things done, right? Are we getting outside time? What can we do to get us back to a good structure? Because now kids are going to be waking up, getting on a bus or getting driven 8 to 3. There's activities, there's aftercare, there's dinner, there's parents working. So if we can slide back into that normal schedule,
I think that'll go a long way. It's not easy to do, but you get a good return. So that's an important thing. I think the other thing is calibrating expectations, right? Knowing what it's going to be like this fall. So is there anything been sent out to parents in terms of what are masking expectations or distancing expectations, quarantine expectations? Have they talked about hybrid options for the districts or in-person learning? What are the expectations? What's that school going to look like? If you can have your kid look at that email alongside of you within reason, right? In kid terms, can they look at the website? Are there any pictures, especially newbies going to a new school, right, to kind of prep that? So setting expectations around the COVID piece, and then the expectations that there might be a little bit of a honeymoon, and that first day might be great, and then it might dip a little bit. So you as a parent knowing that, to anticipate that a little bit, so you're not caught off guard, you're proactive around it. So I think any type of setting expectations appropriately for kid and parent can help. I think another piece, and this is something that I struggle with as a parent, very honestly, is modeling the appropriate thing, right? Like, I get the school email and I'm like, ugh, right? And that's probably not the best model to the kid. So really watching your tone and approach to this upcoming year can really set the right tone for the home. I think that would be important in the coming weeks.
Excellent.
Yeah. Thanks.
Excellent strategies. Along with this, there's been conversations, or families are curious if they should begin to be thoughtful about after school activities. Mm-hmm. Can you discuss your perspective in terms of families rejoining or re-engaging with after school commitments?
Yeah, for sure. So, sometimes after school activities are kind of driven by need, or sometimes they're driven by interest, right? So making sure those needs are met in terms of care, to be on top of that now would be great. And I know for my family, it's different every day. So outlining what those days are going to look like. And then, kids that are interested in a lot of activities and they can join them safely will be great. I mean, the isolation was really impactful in the last year and a half. So if we can re-engage the kids in a very safe, healthy way with their peers, and to stimulate them in any big or small way, it doesn't have to be an extravagant after school commitment. It can be something small at local centers that were offered at their school that would be great. So if you could think that through. What I do caution parents with are doing too much too fast, right? So, and I'm equally as guilty of it, but we want to try to get back to that schedule, maintain some consistency. We don't want to throw a ton at them. So maybe they do a fall sport now and then a different club moving forward instead of doing both at the same time. Each parent knows their own kid. For some kids, that's exactly what they need. Sometimes that's overwhelming. So I really support after school engagement. You just have to know the sweet spot for how much and what works for your family, but definitely can be a great thing for children and families.
Thank you. And I think that's really critical for the super parents like myself. Yeah. I try to have that cape on, but this might not be the best time to have our capes on.
Yeah.
All right. So, us at Family Connections, we've been hearing from families about loss, just confusion and fear. Can you talk about what you've been hearing from the children and families that you work with?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that right from the get-go, everybody, again, kind of caught off guard instantly was reporting a lot of, kind of confusion in terms of like, what is going on? What is this, right? It's novel to a lot of people right now raising children. So I think confusion, again, a lot of uncertainty really came with this pandemic for families. I think that's hard. A lot of loss, right? We saw loss in terms of medical and health with families. We saw loss in terms of just engagement, right? Families that are used to seeing grandparents are used to that after school activity. The loss of school, right? These kids were yanked from school, which provides so much for families. That's families' core base, and we yanked it right from them with purpose, but to a kid, it feels yanked. So a lot of loss in that way, right? The tangible and the things you can't put your hands on, but that you feel this loss. We saw some mourning and grieving for what life was like before, how to cope, what to do, how to be appropriate, in a vigilance, right? Walking to a supermarket, throwing on your mask because you're caught off guard, right? We saw all of that kind of amp up. So I've heard it from families that have really young children who aren't school aged. I saw it a lot. Our school age, our parents returning to work, not returning to work. It was a very, very, again, kind of stress plus beyond what is in our established toolbox. So a lot of struggling in this last year, I think. And I think we felt like there's been pockets of moving through it, and then we kind of slide back in terms of restrictions, and that unpredictability also can be really stressful and feel like loss once again. So it's been a tough year.
Yeah. Thank you for that response as well. So, I think it's important and definitely want to also provide some strategies and tips that our families can engage as it relates to coping and grieving. For us in our household, painting was a fun activity that we started to do as a family. We've made plenty of TikTok videos, and I can imagine we'll have more TikTok videos to stay in tune with my 13 and 10-year-old. But what are some other activities? Is it journaling, writing letters to really just jot those feelings and anxieties down?
Yeah, for sure. So I think there's a couple of things to think about. This last year, we talked about the loss and the kind of the pain and some of the uncomfortable pieces of last year. There's also been this resilience and growth. And I know resilient kids are really naturally resilient. You can build resilience. It's a great place to be. So it's been a little bit of both, right? There's been this these strengths this last year and this growth. So highlighting and focusing on both can be great. So journaling things that have improved this year or changed, right? So I think, we've been around our dog a lot more, right? Something small. Right now he's sad that we're leaving more, but right, that's been a plus this last year, right? So even if you're finding a really small thing that seems small can be really impactful, right? And doing some gratitude around some gains in the last year, right? Time together. We've certainly been smushed into a house a lot more than normal. And what are the pluses of that? So focusing on some gratitude. Kids have done COVID time capsules, trying to think of like what they could have from this time so that they can reflect any type of just opportunity to talk it through, right? Like this is crazy, right? It's a very simple way for a kid to really get it out there. So any opportunity to talk or narrate this last year, journaling, gratitude, even putting like a cup on your table and putting in like a slip of something you're grateful for that day or in the last year can help. In terms of practical strategies, it sounds very simple, but you get, again, good return is just getting your kid to learn how to breathe. It sounds really simple and maybe not have huge return, but it does. I think the number of times I catch my own self during the day going, I know I breathe throughout the day, but did I actually feel my body breathe and take a moment to be calm or mindful? And teaching a kid how to do that. There's Sesame Street character YouTubes on how to do it. There's lots of YouTubes on it, but a really simple thing is to tell a kid or to teach a kid how to take a belly breath is to breathe in through your nose like you're smelling a flower and out like you're blowing a birthday candle. And so to teach them that quick trick. So they're feeling anxious at school. They're feeling anxious because maybe mom and dad aren't home after school, or they're noticing the bustle, right, of mom and dad trying to make this all work, or different caregivers and grandparents trying to make this work. A simple moment to put your hands on your belly and breathe, right? In like you're smelling a flower, out like a birthday candle, can be a really quick and easy technique that we can all do. You can do it anywhere. Sometimes some of the techniques you can't do them everywhere. You can't really generalize them. Breathing, you can. So that's a great thing to teach and work with kids on.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. And would that be helpful for parents to also brush up on?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. I would like to give a special shout out to all of the educators who are watching this evening, as I just have grown to appreciate your skill set even more, the patience, the skill set that it takes to teach our children. And so this question is for all of you. What advice for our educators who are watching tonight?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Talk about something that should be on every family's gratitude jar. We just mentioned gratitude. I mean, what we've seen this last year is just unbelievable work and effort from all of our educators and our schools. And again, in an unprecedented time, right? No one knew how to do this. And we instantly asked teachers and educators to go virtual within a couple of days, and they had never done that, right? So, and online learning and homeschool homeschooling are their own disciplines, right? They're not something you just switch to. And we asked everybody, teachers and parents, to switch to it. I was certainly not my best self. I'll tell you that. As a psychologist, my workload increased dramatically. So my husband then moved home, and both of our kids were then home. And that dog was home, who again was a blessing and a curse. But there was a lot of us in one place. None of us knew what to do. So we relied on our teacher. So I looked for that daily email from a teacher, the Zoom time and opportunity for our teachers. I mean, they carried us in this last year. So a tremendous amount of gratitude. In the year coming up, I would love for them to also take a moment to breathe, even if they go into their book closet or the bathroom and they take a time to breathe, would be great. They can do mindful minutes in their classroom, seemingly for the kids, but they also get a mindful minute too. To think about ways to offer self-care. Again, for them, sleep is important. Their diet is important. If they can work out and be active in any way, which is a tall order when they're so busy, but some focus on self-care can go a long way this year. These teachers were really voices for our kids in the last year, really saying what's developmentally appropriate, what are their bounds, what can they do, what makes the most sense. I heard a lot of educators focusing on education, right? Paramount. It's so important. But let's get these kids playing, right? Can we get them outside? Can we get them playing? So to continue to be that voice and advocate for our kids would be something I'd ask. And it's just been unreal. So any time to breathe. And then I think things to consider also in their classroom, these kids have been through trauma, more or less, right? Some impacted more than others. And to have a trauma-informed classroom if they can, if the school districts could offer some training or professional development on what that looks like, how to respond, how to see the behavior for what it is, right? That's a signal that a kid is in need. So to kind of pause at times, I think would be helpful. So hopefully the districts are supporting teachers with that, because I think that'll be really important. And to think about those kids that, all kids were sent home, and then they probably also have kids with learning differences or neurodiversity, they really took a hit in this last year in terms of their services. So if they can continue to be a voice for that type of programming and meal programming and extracurricular activities, to continue to be the voice, I'd like to offer them gratitude and then ask them to keep going, because they've been so great in the last year. So, but they really need to take care of themselves any small way that they can.
Okay. Thank you for that response. Now, the following questions stem from families that we're currently working with at Family Connections and also staff. And we wanted to take this platform as an opportunity for you to please provide a response to these questions. What are signs of stress that we should look for in young ones to know that they need additional support? There's a lot of concern about first-time kindergartners and preschoolers.
Yep.
So can you elaborate on that question, please?
And I think just like any grown-up, any kid shows stress in their own way. I have two boys, and I have two very different boys. So they demonstrate stress in really different ways. So knowing and understanding your kids in terms of what their stress signs are, I think is important. I think it's important to know that any transition, if this pandemic didn't happen and we were returning to school anyway, right, there's some stress and anxiety that comes with that. So knowing that some piece of it is normal, knowing that it's really custom to your kid and you can see it. But, sometimes we see it in acting out. Sometimes we see it in kind of withdrawal or apathy, especially some of our older middle schoolers will see it withdraw, irritability. So they give us some signals. I always tell parents, see if those, there's any kind of quick fixes, any needs that need to be met, right? Do you need a nap, right? Something easy. Is there anything like that can be met? And then we try to see if, again, it extends beyond that toolbox. And then to address that, as parents, think through a couple of things. So how often is this tantrum, for example, happening, right? Is it happening more than I would expect or more than, my son normally does, right? Is it more frequently? Is it more intense, right? Is it, wow, this is totally not calibrated. This was a really small thing, a spilled milk, right? And we had a huge reaction. And that's different for my son, right? Is that intensity any different? Number of times, more tantrums in a day, right? Is that happening more withdrawing than we normally see? And are those things lasting longer than we think that they should? Something happens and we can't shake it, right? Is it weeks have gone by and we just can't seem to move out of this? We kind of stuck in this. So I urge parents to kind of think through, is it different from what they normally see with their kid? And then again, is it happening more and bigger than it's been in the past? And that gives you some information. And then it's really, where do you go? That's always the next parent question. I field a lot of questions of just navigation. How do I get there? What do I need to do? And there's lots of great resources in the community. So just your own PCP can tell you if you have a healthcare community provider, pediatricians, groups like Family Connections, right? There's a lot of knowledgeable grown-ups who have raised kids and are very well educated in child development and community resources. Reach out. Lots of community-based programmings, right? So ask, right? There's lots of good places to go, and then let a professional again calibrate. Is this, this is what we typically see at this age. Let's ride this out a little bit. Or I'm hearing you definitely say this is bigger than we'd expect for him. It's bigger than I'd expect at this age. Let me give you some practical strategies and support. But it's always to reach out, and get someone to educate you. And hopefully it's a couple of easy things that can be implemented. And if not, then professionals are there to help. So teachers, Yep.
Yes, I definitely would agree that there are a lot of available community-based resources to help families navigate through these times. We've seen that just culturally, there are some families and children who have been taught to keep what goes on in their house in their house.
Yep.
And so any guidance to really help encourage children to speak and to just talk to someone about their feelings.
Yep. And that's where those great teachers, the great teachers, the secretaries, the nurses, right? They're paying attention. So I always urge educators that if, or anybody in the school personnel to try to trust their gut. If they see something going on and could reach out. Sometimes it's a simple smile. It's, hey, here's a sticky note with a, just a little message on it, right? There's lots of small ways, but you're right. It's really hard for anybody, grown-ups or kids, to say, hey, this is what's going on. I've been told to keep it hush. I don't know quite what to do with it. It's bigger than me, right? I think oftentimes grown-up stuff falls on kids' shoulders and they're not as broad, right? And that's a lot of weight to carry. So where do they put it? So it becomes a lot of responsibility from schools, pediatricians, but urging journaling, list little ways that they can keep or do art, right? If it's going to stay at home, because that is a reality for some families, is it's never going to get shared. It's just not going to. So if that is the circumstance, helping them develop kind of within their own space things that work. Otherwise, to find just a simple phrase like, I need help, right? I need help. And then it's the grown-up's job to kind of pry and say, do you need X, Y, or Z, right? But just to get out that simple phrase of, I need something, I need help, I have a need, can be a very simple way to engage a really good grown-up.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Thank you. We have another question here from a participating family of Family Connections. And so really want to hone in on strategies to help their children preparing to go into pre-K and also kindergarten, since they've been at home for the last year.
Yeah.
If there's strategies for their two children.
Yep, for sure. So outside of a pandemic, that's a big leap, right? That is a really big move. And I'm sure my son's kindergarten teacher was watching this, she'd laugh. I remember like holding on to my son, eyes looking over at his kindergarten teacher, and she was like, you can go, right? And I was still like, no, I'm good. I'm just going to stay right here. I'm going to hold him right here. Because it is a big leap, right? It's a big developmental transition. That your kid your kid's needs, you're trying to meet them. Is the school going to anticipate them? Are they prepared academically for whatever those years entail? Are they going to meet nice kids? There's a lot. And then there's the logistics of working, getting them there, right? The whole logistics of them, having them out of your home. So it's a big transition time for the kids, for the grownups, for the family as a system. So it's a challenging time. So I think, again, we're down to these couple of weeks. Again, any bucket list things the kiddo wants to check off that feels good that they want to do with their caregiver. anything in terms of expectations, right? What's mask wearing look like? Do they do circle time? Ask your teacher, what's the flow of the day? Shoot an email and say, I know you're super busy, but just curious about the flow of the day. Do you have circle time and then a field class? Do you have circle time and then go outside? What's that look like? And kind of draw it out for your kiddo. I love using social stories with any age group, but particularly that age group. Couple pages. You can use sticky notes to make it like a flip book. You can use anything. You can make it like a cartoon strip. You can go super fancy with it, but you just need basic. And you kind of draw out, this is what our day is going to look like. Or, and then you're going to come home to mom, or you're going to go to grandma, or you're going to go to camp, right? That after school care. What's this going to look like? So draw it out. Draw out how to meet a friend, right? If you're feeling nervous, remember that belly breathing, right? And draw it out. So I like anything a kid can kind of have with them. Some parents will send a little something in the kid's pocket, is something the kid can hold on to and remember home. That can help. It sometimes becomes a distraction, so you should be prepared if a note comes home, but sometimes that can go a long way for a kiddo. Assuring them that there's an end time, right? It ends at X and you're going to see me at X. Really helps a kid know that, that there's that kind of temporal relationship with it. And, the things that might seem hard, I bet that is going to be a little bit tricky, really validating that. But isn't it cool that you're going to ride a bus? Or isn't it cool that your classroom has this? So I think a lot about those connection words, right? Like, I'm a little bit worried and I'm excited, right, for this. Those connection, just that simple word of and. This seems hard, but I know I'm good at hard things, right? Like a little narration using those small connection words go a long way for kids to hold all those emotions in their head during that transition time. And our young ones can do that. Our PreKers and kindergartners can do that. To rely on supports like family connections, right? Who really understand that development time. They're really invested in school readiness. Let them, take a hand and help you through it. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
You hit on mask wearing, and so there's another question from a parent in terms of the best way to explain why we have to wear masks at this time.
Yep. That's been an ongoing thing. And again, there's YouTubes on it. There's really great websites for it. So there's some resources around mask wearing. I always go back to kind of the social stories and practice and modeling. So if I want my kid to wear a mask, even if the expectation's not for me, depending on the setting and my vaccination status, maybe I wear a mask as if to model that that's what I'm doing for part of my community. So that modeling is important. The way to practice it, right? Some kids have been home, so probably have only done short grocery store runs or short stints with a mask on. Try to wear it around the house. Show them how to do it around their ears. Keep it above their nose, right? What's appropriate for mask wearing. So practice always helps a kid. And then I go back to those social stories. So again, a couple pages around, this is why I wear a mask, right? I'm a member of this family. I care for my family. I care for my community. And to do that, I wear a mask. Right. So, and putting pictures of the family or kiddos or building them on your phone. So some understanding of the reason why we're doing it and that there's an end in sight. Right. So then when you come home and wash your hands, right, and we take all your stuff off from school, then you're going to be done with your mask. So, outlining the time frame, outlining the practice of how to get it done. And then I like just giving them kind of short sentences of the picture around a social story around this is why we're doing it. We're doing it to care for this little one at home who is brand new to our family, right? This newborn. We're doing it because we have a compromised grandparent or another caregiver. Kind of a small age appropriate explanation can go a long way for a kiddo.
Thank you. Across districts, there have been a lot of themes that have arisen from educators, from caregivers, from students as it relates to lower expectations. Can you address that in terms of the hesitation, raising the bar?
Yep.
Can you just talk about that?
Yep. I'm hopeful there's a sweet spot. I joke kind of the key to happiness at times is low expectations, meaning that expect the dip, right? Know that you might have a honeymoon period and then you expect the dip. So expectations in that way to know that you're sending human beings to school, you're a human being working, this might not go great, right? So that's one way I think about expectations, very real human expectations. The other is this expectations around our kids' education, right? And did they lose any time? Was there missed work? Was there a COVID slide? What is the appropriate amount to fill that gap? What does fill that gap? And that's really kid dependent. We've seen some kids with specialized instruction really take a hit. We've seen other kids not take a hit. How much can you push a kid? So in each district has the ability to do that more or less, right? Some districts don't have the ability to close those gaps. So finding it in your community where you can to kind of recalibrate their education at that time is helpful. And then I'm pretty basic in that I love children's play. I love outdoor time. I love games with parents. I love communicating with your kids. You can make a lot of kind of resilience building and gains in those really basic things. And then you have a really great platform for when they can return to academic instruction. So keeping them kind of ripe for that would be great. But that most certainly is a very heavy burden for the educational system. There's going to be somewhat of a cohort effect that everybody has kind of lost this time, but it's so varying in terms of access to services and district in terms of the hit. So any way you can keep them primed for learning, any small opportunity to get the instruction in their local libraries, right, is a great way to reach and access programming and information. So finding it in ways that you can to, level things out, I think is all you can do, right? That's the other expectation, what we can do, right? There's only so much that can be done. So outside of the systems. So yeah, it's complicated.
Yes, it is complicated, and I think that is definitely a part of the theme that we want to make sure all of you are very clear about. This will be a challenging year. We are to push forward and do so together, and we want you all to feel supported. As we come to a close this evening, Dr. Spanigo, are there any last words, thoughts, comments that you want to share with the viewers today?
Sure. I hope that we walked away with some very practical pieces, social stories, practicing some belly breathing, right? I hope I offered some practical pieces and really just to breathe, right? And to take in the last year and to know that these families, all of you are doing a really great job. We lose sight of that, right? We're doing the best that we can in the unimaginable. So I hope that they feel seen. I hope that tonight was a safe space and they have some practical strategies to walk away with because they're really doing an outstanding job. So.
Well, thank you so very much for that.
Thanks, Tiffany.
And we thank all of you all for joining us today. Please stay tuned. We will be sure to provide resources to all of you. If you have additional questions, you can please visit the Family Connections website that can be found at www.familyconnections1.org, and we will be sure to reach out. You can also stay tuned for opportunities in programming to join us as we all embark through this very, very challenging times together. Take care.